Welcome to my channel. I'm the Dark Lord of Optics, and what I bring you here is a thinking man's take on guns and optics with occasional forays into politics. Thank you for being here. Alright folks, it's another beautiful day in Albuquerque, and I'd like to use this scenery to talk a little bit about an interesting binocular that I've been playing with. I'm more or less done with it, and it is this guy, this Steiner LRF binocular. It's a military M1050R LRF. That's what the model is called. It's big, beefy, it's sort of an interesting design. I'm really rather enjoying it. It's mostly spectacular. There is, however, one significant flaw. For background, this is a old style Poro prism binocular. Poro, for comparison, when you see straight barrels, this is called the roof prism. When you see barrels that are like this, eyepieces and objectives are offset, that's called Poro. There are different types of prisms that both have their advantages and disadvantages. Another thing that is kind of different from most modern binoculars with this guy, well, it's a modern binocular, it's just a different style. The big difference is that there is no center focus. Most binoculars, when you grab them, you need to be able to reach the center focus to adjust focus. This guy has two individual focus settings in each eyepiece, and the way it is typically used, you focus it at some reasonable distance. They say 50 yards. For me, it actually works better if I focus it at about 100 yards, and then from there on, it basically works just fine all the way out to infinity. This is what we used to call field binoculars. The downside, of course, if you try to look at something closer, look at insects and birds that are not very far away, stuff like that, that doesn't work. It becomes cumbersome. You have to adjust the two eyepieces separately and stuff like that. That is kind of a pain in the ass. It's not what it's for. This binocular is unabashedly designed for tactical application, for shooters, things like that. Okay. Couple things to get out of the way immediately. I'm not a birder. I do occasional nature observation, but by and large I'm a shooter. So when I look at a binocular, spotting scope, any real observation optics, well, I just did a live show on observation optics. I'll put a link down below in the description. When I look at any of the observation optics, the prism I'm looking through is that how well does it work for shooters, for people like me. This one generally works really, really well. There is one fatal flaw, which is why I'm not buying this from Steiner. But if that is not a flaw for you, this should be on your list. Optically, this guy is spectacular. 10 power magnification, 50mm objectives. It looks big and bulky, but it is surprisingly comfortable to hold. And since I don't need to reach for the center focus, there is no center focus, I don't have to worry about a lot of different things. I just hold it, and the laser rangefinder buttons, which are here, is basically setup button, and setup is just to change meters to yards and back, and the range button. It's all right there, it's all under my hand, and because the binocular is fairly wide, I can hold it in a lot more stable manner than I thought I would. It costs right around $3,000, or even a little bit more, maybe $3,200, and honestly, as far as optical performance, it is up there with the Alpha glass. It is really, really nice. And optically, the field of view is decent, resolution is good, color is good. The real standout feature is this amazing depth of field. Depth of field is what allows this binocular to get away without having to refocus when you're looking at something reasonably far away. It's all in focus. It has so much depth of field, and because of this depth of field, there is so much texture. One of the reasons I generally like Poro style binoculars is that the objective lenses are spaced fairly far apart. What that does, it gives you a more stereoscopic vision. When you look at this through this binocular, not only do you end up with really, really significant depth of field, which gives you a very nice three-dimensional view of the picture, but also because the objectives are spaced out wider, it increases depth perception even more. So you see really well, far and somewhat close, right? And you have more of a sense of the actual distance than you typically do with similar roof prism binoculars. This is a real strength of this thing. Unlike many other modern designs, the LRF itself here, there's a laser module here, is not integrated into the barrels. One of the things probably that makes it pretty good. I don't know if there is a single window here. I don't really know whether this is the laser or the receiver. It's hard for me to say. It could be both coaxially. That's not uncommon. I'm really not sure. Probably find out. It is robust. It is sealed really, really well. One of the things that allows military-style Poro binoculars to be so efficiently sealed is the lack of the center focus. Traditionally with Poro binoculars, the center focus knob makes it hard to seal. With these guys, not a problem. Military uses them all the time. They are spectacularly robust. The eyepieces are a little bit on the smallish side. They're not ideal to use with glasses. These are not retractable eyepieces. They have these rubber cups that you can fold back to use, with goggles or something like that, or pull up. For me, they don't work especially well, but it's adequate. I found that eyepieces like this generally work for people whose eyes are set a little bit deeper into their face. Mine are kind of almost stick out in a weird sort of way. So for me, it's not ideal, but it is perfectly workable. The workable enough, and eye relief is forgiving enough, where I didn't really have any major issues using this binocular handheld. On the tripod, of course, it is pretty trivial. Speaking of mounting things on a tripod, given a choice, I really like what I have on this track binocular, these RRS mount that just gives you an integrated arc plate and something like that. Because of the way this guy is built, you can't wrap anything around the barrel sufficiently well to hold it, but on the center hinge here there is a threaded hole that works with many different binocular adapters, like the one I am using here. It's just what you saw when the video just started out. The only real downside to this approach, to some degree, is that if you look at this guy, the way the lens caps are attached, they also attached here on the center hinge, and you kind of have to mess a little bit to get them out of the way, otherwise they can flop and partially block the objective. Aside from that, the tethered caps is something I actually do like, and these are better than most because I can put them kind of in the middle here and they're out of the way, they don't interfere with anything. It's a touch more work to shove them in there when you have a binocular tripod adapter on, but it's not too bad. It is perfectly reasonable. Before I move on to the laser LRF performance, just to reiterate, optically this binocular is absolutely an alpha class binocular, but it is different than the modern Leicas and Zeisses and Swarovskis you're used to, the modern roof prisms that really rely on that center focus. This binocular does depend slightly on your eye being able to adapt. So if you are going to be staring for a very, very significant amount of time at some distance where the binocular is not perfectly focused, you may get a little bit more eye fatigue than with some of the more modern designs that you can focus exactly on the right distance. But honestly, I generally have eye fatigue issues with binoculars, and I spent a lot of time with this thing and I barely ran into anything. I have a suspicion that the stereoscopic vision with very, very wide, very, very large depth of field, I think the combination of that made the view a little bit more relaxing than most others. I enjoyed it. I spent a lot of time with this thing. It's not light. I'll put up the specs momentarily so you can see the specifications, but they're on the website. It's easy to look up. That's not really why you're here. Once again, in terms of optical quality, it was wonderful. Mechanically, I had no issues. Now let's move on to the laser rangefinder. Steiner, I think is the correct way of pronouncing, but everybody here says Steiner. Steiner is not exactly new to laser rangefinders. They've got a bunch of them and a bunch of different ones. And unlike most companies that do binoculars, laser rangefinders for civilians, Steiner does both conventional LRFs that are at a 905 nanometer wavelength and the ones that work at 1535 nanometer wavelength. Those 1535, the longer wavelength one, they are eye safe at a higher laser power, so they can be made to range much further. This one is not a 1535. This is a conventional 905. It is a nice module as far as regular normal laser rangefinders go. It works quite nicely. I spent some time, actually the scene you see behind me, there are some buildings, things like that. I spent some time ranging at different things just before I started this week, just to make sure I'm not bullshitting. And it is quite reliable and it is quite robust. I can, on non-reflective objects, I'm getting things out to about 1800 yards, thereabouts, maybe a touch more. I got a couple of things to range to about 1900 or so, but that was not quite robust enough. You know, when you try to repeat the range, it wasn't quite robust. 1800 was robust. Smaller things I was able to see to about 1000 yards, or so to range, excuse me, to about 1000 yards or thereabouts. Overall, lasing performance is respectable, but if you're trying to look at something to, 2,500–3,000 miles away, you may need a 1550, 1535 nanometer laser rangefinder, something like that. In terms of laser rangefinder features, this is sort of it's a fundamentally nice laser rangefinder, but the additional electronics are simply not there. For me, the basic minimum functionality for a modern laser rangefinder is to give me distance and to give me angle of inclination. If I'm shooting uphill or downhill, I want to know the equivalent horizontal distance, because that is the input I need for the ballistic calculator. And unfortunately, this guy doesn't have it. If it had that one thing, if it gave me angle or equivalent horizontal distance, I would have bought it from Steiner right there on the spot. It is really excellent. And one of the things, other than being Poro design with this great depth of field, one of the other things that makes it really, really stand out from other binoculars out there is the fact that in the left, so the rangefinder screen is in the right barrel. In the left barrel, there is a reticle. There are not a lot of binoculars with a reticle, and of all of the ones I have seen, this is the only one that combines a laser rangefinder and a reticle. That makes a huge difference for me. If I am spotting for someone looking at something, not only can I see it, and if you're trying to find something, the fact that this has great depth of field is really great. You don't have to mess with focus. Not only can I see it, not only can I figure out the distance to it, I can use the same optical device to call out correction if somebody's shooting and I'm spotting. I have a reticle there that allows me to measure the misses, the dimensions, and everything. And on top of it, if I happen to be somewhere out in the boonies and I need to do some distance estimation and battery dies on me and I don't have another battery, the reticle, the milliradian reticle, allows me to do just that. Ranging with the reticle, sort of a perishable skill. People don't do it anymore. We all should do it a little bit. It's not a bad idea to keep the skill alive. And with this binocular, I can actually do that. To summarize, spectacular optics, nice and robust, really holds up well, tripod mountable, good quality laser rangefinder, no means to measure the angle of inclination. And to me, that's basically a fatal flaw. However, if you are interested in a field type binocular and you just need distance, you don't need the, like if you're not a shooter, you don't really need the angle, or if you have some other means to quickly evaluate the angle, this is a nice option. It is off the beaten path. You basically have to be clear that you're not planning to do close range observation so much. You'll be at 50–60 yards and out. If that is what you do, this binocular really flies under the radar, and it shouldn't. And the fact that it is the only one combines laser rangefinder with a reticle makes it quite unique. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you need to get a hold of me, you know where I live, darklordofoptics.com. Please join and post a comment, and I'll do my best to answer as time allows. Thank you for watching.